What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo spoiler summary. Today we're going to be going over the spoilers for chapter 10, and I just have to remind everyone that this is of course not a market substitute. This video and content is only my reaction, review, and commentary on all of the new information coming out about Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. Do everything that you possibly can to support the official release as much as possible by buying the physical volumes, getting a Shonen Jump subscription, so on and so forth. And most importantly, if you want to stay up to date on all things Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo among other series, feel free to follow me on Twitter, subscribe to this channel or my main channel, and make sure you hit that like button and hype button before we get into everything, guys. As always, we are dealing with raw translation, so keep in mind there might be a couple mistakes. Take everything said with a grain of salt, and that's why we support the official release and read it when it comes out. That being said, this chapter deals with specifically the politics between the humans and the Samrians and whether we are actually going to try coexistence or if it will just result in all-out war. There are also mentions to a couple characters from the previous series, such as Yuji and Hikari, and a potential truth towards the theory of Yuji and potentially even Mahito coming back for the final battle. So without any more delay, let's get right into the chapter, which of course the chapter begins as stated with a political meeting of the new Jujutsu higher-ups of this current era. Usami is of course present, and they are watching a holographic replay of Maru fighting the curse user from a couple chapters ago. The oldest man in the room asks if they're really just gonna let this infraction slide, and Usami is unsure of what this person means, very obviously playing coy. The higher-ups believe that they're giving the Samrians way too much freedom in the area, and from what they hear, the Samrians are even getting bold and starting to deny demands. Usami tries to play the entire Maru situation off as just two sorcerers getting rendered unable to fight, such as when Tsurugi and Yuka were taken out by the curse user. Usami says that Maru simply just stepped in to bring the situation under control, but out of nowhere, one of the higher-ups directly calls out the problem, which is Maru attempting to harm Tsurugi in the moment, which genuinely surprises Mino and Usami because Usami and Mino had previously erased all of the footage of Maru and Tsurugi fighting, which means the higher-ups were able to get a hold of it before they could go ahead and do that. This higher-up specifically says that the Samrians would now fall under the threat category if this was the case. However, Usami plays his hand, which is he says that the fight would actually be no violation under the Hikari provision, which makes all of the younger members of the higher-up jump out of their seats exclaiming what, as if they've never heard of this before. There is a young woman though who sits down right next to Usami and begins to explain that there used to be a Hikari provision, a condition that was added to the Jujutsu bylaws that basically said that battles between Jujutsu sorcerers could be turned into public spectacle as long as it was an officially sanctioned form of gambling, which I love because it just shows that Megami, as the head of the Zenin clan, even if you want to call it that anymore, whatever happened after the culling game, was still able to hold up his end of the bargain and get Hikari his fighting club provision. The new higher-ups after the culling game were able to pass this kind of law specifically because the original Article 8 secrecy was already blurred considering the existence of curse spirits was exposed to the world. So they figured that Jujutsu sorcerers and battling out in public for commercial reasons could be something to profit from. Eventually, the whole gambling idea got scrapped. However, the Hikari condition is one of those laws that got added in and was never actually taken out. So technically, even though it's not usually applied to any situation in the modern era, it does still hold up in Jujutsu Court of Law. All of the young people who forgot that this law even existed are completely confused as to why that would even be added and who thought that idea would ever work. This does not stop Usami from taking advantage of that though, and saying that because Maru, Tsurugi, and Yuka are all under his jurisdiction, technically speaking, they're all a part of the same team, and a battle between them would pose no issue as long as they apply the Hikari provision, which makes the higher-ups annoyed as Maru being recognized wasn't passed through headquarters and wasn't officially voted on. But Usami admits because Maru was hired as a civilian guard, he could be tried as a quote-unquote latent sorcerer, which Mino explains is a term in the new Jujutsu bylaws that refers to a crime committed by a sorcerer that genuinely had no idea that they were using cursed energy or they were still new to their powers, allowing them to not get immediately designated as a curse user, almost like a conditional discharge of sorts, a slap on the wrist. The higher-ups still argue that because all of the Samrians can use cursed energy, this can be a problem if we continue to use the laws like this. However, Usami replies that it does not mean that every Samrian can actually manipulate cursed energy, and this prompts the higher-ups to ask why Usami is so intent on defending these aliens. And Usami says he should be the one asking them, why are they so desperate to fight? The higher-ups end up deciding that they still can't take this lying down, and they do need to prompt some kind of warning to the aliens and demonstrate their own deterrence. They have no choice but to reopen a case that they put on hold for some time, which is locating the missing Itadori Yuji. And we do get a panel here of Yuji walking through a crowd of people, implying that potentially Yuji has just gone off grid doing his own thing, or there's some kind of mission that he knows about that we are just not privy to yet. For whatever reason, we now have an undeniable proof that Yuji is not only still alive and existing. One of the goals of the story is going to be locating and finding where he is. Usami can't exactly ignore that this is a good idea at the very least. However, he does remind the higher-ups that treating this situation as if it was a business or corporation as opposed to a meeting of nations is only going to end up biting them in the ass in the long run. And if they really want to get off their ass and start doing their job now of all times, Usami would at the very least appreciate if they didn't damn the country in the middle of it. Meanwhile, on the Sumerian side of things, we actually catch up with a Sumerian man that we saw from the previous flashback. One of the guys that Cross beat up for destroying the canal before it became normalized for the Lumerians. This guy is once again on his soapbox complaining that an outsider like Deborah gets to make the final decision, as it's revealed that since they migrated from Sumeria, Deborah has ultimately served as chieftain of the entire tribe. The tribe did end up passing democratic voting rights. However, at the end of the day, Deborah has full power to veto that and make his own decisions. The man admitting that it makes voting kind of pointless, and he doesn't see this as being any different from a dictatorship. But the elder reminds him that this was decided by Maru and Cross, believing that it's precisely the fact that Deborah is an outsider why he's best fit to serve as chieftain, as he can judge things from a detached and objective standpoint. But this man, known as Aski, reminds the elder that they were basically exiled from the planet because of Deborah, which shows the mindset of people like this, where obviously Deborah was not the reason for them getting exiled. It was the Discante chief and the Discante greed overall, but Deborah was just the puppet that they used to do so. So you see how that hatred gets focused on the front line, the man that did the deed, as opposed to the overall person that is responsible. Even if they got rid of Deborah, that's not going to solve the fact that all of the Discante don't want the Lumerians around. So you see, even after all of this, Aski's thinking hasn't necessarily changed. It's still taking anger out on the people in front of you, as opposed to the overall overlords that are actually responsible up at the top. The elder tells Aski to control himself, reminding him that a chieftain can only veto the council's consensus twice, meaning that Deborah can't just landslide them every single time. Eventually, he'll have to give in. And especially with Maru's injury being well known throughout the entire Sumerian assembly, it's most likely that we will be reaching the point of war, implying that the Sumerians have voted for war against the Earthlings twice already. However, Deborah has vetoed them completely every single time. But if they vote for this third time and they once again achieve the result of war and invasion, Deborah will have no choice but to let the Lumerians invade Earth, revealing that there are definitely Sumerians in the higher ups that more than likely just want to invade Earth and get things over with. The elder saying that at last, after this third vote, our will be carried out, and Aski saying that they can finally crush this island nation and begin creating autonomous zones inside the capital region. Both of them loving the idea that once they take over Japan, instead of being Lumerians, they can finally be the Discante, never again having to accept being the ones who get stolen from, and finally being able to steal, showing how the cycle of violence continues through people like this. They have had things taken from them, so therefore they don't feel bad doing the same things to other people. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, you have Cross and Jabaloma meeting up to discuss things. And Cross asked Jabaloma why he hasn't actually voted on whether they should coexist or not. And that's because Jabaloma admits he's waiting to hear what Cross's opinion is on the fact. Jabaloma says that Cross and him each hold a very large portion of the voting rights in the Sumerian tribe, meaning that if they both choose coexistence, then there's no way invasion would properly pass through. Jabaloma is more than willing to go with Cross if he chooses coexistence, but at the same time, if he chooses invasion, that's fine too. Cross asks Jabaloma if he has a will of his own and has any kind of opinion, but Jabaloma says that sometimes trusting people is also an act of will as well, which just shows how open-minded someone like Jabaloma can really be, because as someone who has gone through so much and is obviously an elder of the tribe, he's more than willing to default to what the younger generation wants in this world. Very similar to how a character like Usami is is trusting Yuka and Tsurugi to push coexistence through as well. Jabaloma, at the end of the day, just wants what's best for his people and what his people want. There really is no selfishness in there. And I've got to say, I've come to really love this guy over the course of these last couple of chapters. It's kind of insane. And as the Sumerians vote and Cross wonders about his answer, he thinks back to the moments that he has shared with the Earthlings. The small little child that lost his balloon, Tsurugi apologizing, admitting that he was wrong, and Yuka telling him that they can bring an end to the cycle of violence together. He even thinks of Dora and thinks of the values of neighbors. And as he thinks back to the different scenes he's seen in his childhood of prosper, but also destruction, a disgusted look falls over Cross's face as he places in his vote. And as Jabaloma counts the votes, surprisingly, the tallies come for coexistence with the people of Earth. This makes a Samrian like Oski yell out, exclaiming how the hell this could possibly happen. Absolutely annoyed that Cross and Jabaloma would change their sides on such an integral vote like this. He also tries to claim they can't vote for Maru since he's not conscious and available. However, Cross admits it's very obvious Maru was on the side of coexistence from the beginning, and they have no need to wake him up for his answer. And now, funnily enough, Oski, hoping that Deborah will veto them just as he's always done, calls out for Deborah and asks what his answer is. And much to Oski's annoyance again, Deborah actually agrees with coexistence, not seeing a problem at all with it. Deborah reminds Oski though that conflict or invasion and war can begin at really any time. However, once they've started war, they can't exactly undo it, and any chance they had to ever coexist or understand one another is gone from there. So Deborah thinks they should at least try to get to know each other, reminding Oski that isn't that what Dora wanted for them all along, to find neighbors? We see Jabaloma and Cross walking away from the voting room. Jabaloma admits that he respects Cross, which is a stark parallel to Cross respecting Jabaloma before. And with the vote of Sumerian coexistence passed, they meet once again up with Usami, Yuka, and Tsurugi to discuss the terms of not only coexistence, but a potential meeting and dinner for everyone to get to know one another and exchange goodwill. Usami admits he's surprised to hear that Deborah was actually someone that tried to help the Sumerians, as seeing him and feeling his energy, he would have immediately put Deborah off as a villain. Everyone discusses cultural norms such as the Kallion. Jabaloma reveals that the Kallion is actually immortal, and that's why they see it as something sacred, because it can only die if killed. Designating Maru and Cross to assist with the preparations of the Sumerian and human dinner, Yuka and Tsurugi also team up with the aliens and discuss the best ways to cook. So most of the discussions from here just discuss Cross, Maru, and Yuka and Tsurugi and their different kinds of cultural taboos when it comes to food, offensive meals, or anything that might be allergic to the Sumerian people. It's unclear what is going to come of this dinner, but it seems like almost undoubtedly, knowing how much is left in the story, there has to be something that causes some kind of stir amongst the humans and Sumerians, especially knowing that people like Oski and most likely others in the kind of tribe that are already able to pass invasion without people like Cross, Jabaloma, and Maru's votes. It's completely possible that if these guys were more than willing to sabotage the canal, these guys would be more than willing to sabotage coexistence as well. And that's just my prediction, because to be honest with you, the rest of the chapter just goes over food, and if you want to get more information on that and you really care about that, again, support the official release as best you possibly can and read the new chapter when it comes out. But guys, thank you so much for going through this chapter with me, the chapter spoiler summary. I really appreciate you if you've made it this far into the end of the video. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Follow my main channel as well. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.